One. Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Kagiyama, and I'd like to welcome everyone here to the Cancer Conquering Community. Today, we are honored to have uh, a guest panel, and we start with Cara Onorato and also Brittany Ross, and along with myself and Ligia, our co-moderator, we're going to be speaking about childhood cancer, and it's something that it's always been in the back of my mind, and I wouldn't wish childhood cancer on anyone. Absolutely, it's just such a frightening thought, and
Mhm.
we have some people with direct experience who are willing to share what they've gone through. And I'm going to start with Cara Onorato. Please introduce yourself and go ahead and share your story. And also, we can talk later on about what you do to uh, to help with the cause.
Thank you, Mark. I'm happy to be here, and I'm always honored when you ask me to be involved with anything that you're doing. I always say that everybody needs a Mark introduction. He does the best. He makes you feel like $1 million. Um, so
Yeah.
briefly, my journey with cancer actually started at 8 years old when my paternal grandmother was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I've lost three of my four grandparents to cancer since then, two aunts, a couple cousins, numerous amounts of friends. And so I've always been very passionate about cancer advocacy as far as patient access to care, clinical trials, and as well as raising money for research. I never thought in a million years that it would literally come behind my door, right? In 2015, my daughter was 19. Her name is Sonny. Her name was Sonata Bell. She preferred Sonny. She
Mhm.
was all of that and then some, an absolute beacon of sunshine, a ray of sunshine. She was living the normal 19-year-old life. You know, she was going to school, she was working, she had a social life, she was playing a pickup soccer league. And right about June or July of 2015, she started not feeling well. She just complained about being tired. And I just thought she was 19, doing all the things that 19-year-olds do, right? Wearing themselves thin and being in a million places on little sleep and not eating right. But then in mid October of 2015, she came down with strep throat. Something in my mom gut told me that it was more than just that, you know, but it's hard to tell a 19-year-old what to do. It's hard to tell any child once you hit 13 what to do, but when they're 19 and they're practically an adult of their own, it's very difficult. So long story short, she went to the doctor three different times. The third time, the doctor basically made her feel like a hypochondriac. She did end up writing him a letter once she received her diagnosis. However, she left there saying to her boyfriend at the time, he didn't even take my blood. Like, what if I have cancer? Right.
Oh,
And I had been telling her that I would be checking on her regularly, and if she had experienced a fever of over 100 degrees, she needed to go straight to the emergency room. I don't know why I said it. I just, again, on my mom heart, my mom gut, I just felt like something else was wrong. And so October 13th comes, and this day will live in my memory for forever. It's the day my life changed completely. Um, I had called her at about 10 o'clock in the morning to talk to her to see how she was feeling, and her father answered the phone. One thing I will say about her father is while we couldn't make it as husband and wife, he was a devoted father and a very hard worker. That man worked 80, 90 hours a week. And for him to be answering her phone at 10 o'clock in the morning, I immediately knew something was wrong. I'd only seen this man cry once in my entire life of knowing him, and I could hear his voice cracking, right? So I knew something was going on. And he was sitting right next to her. He didn't want to worry her. So I spoke and asked questions that he could answer yes or no to. And that was it. I dropped everything and I went straight to Atlanta where she was at Emory University Hospital. And they told us she had acute myeloid leukemia. And if she could get anything, she got the worst of the worst. I mean, Britt, I'm sure you'll speak to what AML is and does
Yeah.
too. And
Yep.
she got the worst of the worst. Then she had FLT3 genetic mutation, right? So basically, from how I understand it, I'm not a clinician. From how I understand it, that made typical treatment modalities almost useless for her because she was never able to rid her body totally of the leukemia at all. She had a very compassionate but straightforward doctor who got her to a point where he felt good enough to do a stem cell transplant for her. She did that. She did 2 other clinical trials, embarked on a third one when in March of 2017, she became septic. As you know, cancer requires a lot of antibiotics and a lot of antifungals, antivirals, and her gut biome was just shot. And at that point, there was just nothing else they could do. And so she made the decision after being in the hospital for about 4 or 5 days. She didn't want any more treatment because it was just prolonging the inevitable. And we spent 5 days in hospice loving on her, praying over her, a lot of crying and back and forth. And her father and I were in the room when she passed at 2:13 in the afternoon on March 29th, which we're coming up on that anniversary. And it just seems fortuitous that I would be sitting here the month of March discussing her with y'all. She's my why. She's the reason why I'm involved with the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, and she's why I'm here today. She's why I open my heart and I would open my home to anybody who is experiencing cancer. She's the reason I have a voice with LLS. She's the one that started that whole movement by participating into like the night walks back in 2016 and 2017. So that's the long-winded version of my story of Sonny. I just want everybody to know her. I want people to know that cancer, it has a face, it's human, and is, although you might not have it yourself, that it impacts everybody that knows the person that has cancer. And I think that by sharing my daughter's light and her sunshine with the world, hopefully that will get people to want to listen and want to also advocate and raise money for research.
I have a question for you, Kara. I
Yes.
mean, I think uh, many of us have kids. I have 2 daughters of my own and a grandchild. I mean, I've always prayed that, that they're healthy and that they're safe. But always in the back of your mind, it's what if they were to get cancer, how would you handle it? And I mean, you've actually dealt with it. And so from that perspective, what advice would you give to parents when their child is diagnosed with cancer?
I think that depends on the child's age, right? Sonny used to say, Mom, I don't know how the parents of babies do this, right? I don't know. I felt helpless enough as it was, and she was 19 and could tell me what was wrong with her. I couldn't imagine what it would be like
Mm-hmm.
to have a younger child, especially even an infant. What I can say from my perspective is a couple of things. I really quickly realized that I couldn't do the things I wanted to do. I wanted to sell all my things, leave Washington, D.C., go stay on my friend's floor in Atlanta, and just be that helicopter mama the whole time, right? I would have drove her absolutely crazy. That's not what she wanted, even though that's what I wanted as a mom. And having to understand to give her the space that she needed to have a bad day, right? Because at 19, you shouldn't have to deal with your mortality. And she had a voice, and I had to let her use that voice. The other thing is letting myself be her punching bag if she needed it, which she had bad days, don't get me wrong, but she was more love and hope than she was, bad days. But you also have to give yourself the space to worry and cry and get angry and cuss at the world and whoever you pray to. I mean, that certainly happened too. But I did that in a safe space outside of the space of where my daughter was. She very rarely got to see a tear come out of my eye, up until the end, and I couldn't help it. They just poured out of my face. Um, you have to be strong for your children. They're looking to you for guidance. They're scared too, and I know we want to kiss their little foreheads and take their boo-boos away, but we can't. And you have to do it with a compassion and honesty, and just giving them that space to have their giant feelings because they deserve it.
When you were when she was in hospice, uh, and I remember when my sister was in hospice and she was just I actually had a chance to see her like a few days before she passed. Uh, and talk about how I mean, I can't imagine because you were there so much. Uh, how do you keep it together when all this is going on? I mean, you have the role your role as a parent, but I mean, this is your daughter. I mean, I just can't even imagine
Yeah,
what was going through your mind.
it was hard. It was really hard. I always tell myself I'm not going to cry when I do these things, but inevitably the tears always come. I think the greatest honor you can have as a human being is to walk with somebody on their journey to the other side and help them do that with honor and in a safe space. Um, I was there by myself, essentially. I mean, her father and I had been divorced for quite some time by that time. My family didn't really have a lot of means to be there, but his whole family was there and all his friends. And, it's kind of difficult when you're navigating things as a divorced parent of a sick child, and there's, emotions and dynamics that go through. But one thing I can tell you about me is I'm a caregiver through and through. And I was there comforting other people and letting them cry to me. And when it was my turn, I'd leave the family waiting area of the room and I'd go outside and call some of my friends who have lost children and cry with them and get strength from them. Um, I had a couple of moments. Sepsis is not pretty, and the way she contracted sepsis is because she had oh my gosh, it's leaving my mind. But anyways, she was very sick, and she was in lots and lots and lots of pain. And so going down to hospice helped that. But some people, when they're transitioning, they get what they call the death rattle. And I think that is what shook me the most because I felt like she was anxious, and I didn't want her to be scared, you know. So I made a makeshift little bed of chairs and I sat beside her bed and I prayed in her ear and let her know it was going to be okay. I mean, the last conversation I had with her while she was still coherent was I told her she put up a good fight, and she had told me she knew, and I told her it was okay. She didn't have to fight anymore. She's like, I know, Mama. And I told her, I said, your Papa's waiting there, which, by the way, Papa, pancreatic cancer took Papa, I said, he's waiting there on his little tractor. He's going to ride you all through heaven, and heaven's full of beaches, which was her favorite place to be. And it really wasn't about me in those moments. I let her know I was going to be okay. But on the inside, I was a hot mess. I was a hot mess. Some days I still am, but I give myself that space to feel those emotions. And then the next day it's a new day, right? Because there's other people that need me to have my stuff together and make sure that they have a voice or somebody to hear them too. I would be doing her a great disservice if I didn't keep my promise to her by being not being okay. And that's kind of how I look at it.
I have a couple questions for you, and then I'm gonna go to Ligia and see if she has anything for you. I
Sure.
always I love talking to you, Kara, because
Thank
because I,
you. So
I just
glad.
get so inspired. And if you could explain the death rattle, I've never heard that term before. And then, once Sonny passed, how were you able to um, help yourself mend? What did you do?
So the death rattle is, it literally sounds like their insides are rattling with their breath, right? And it's like a low guttural like moan. Um, and I honestly feel like it's just the spirit transitioning out of the body, and the body shutting down. Um, she would get anxious and she'd fidget uncontrollably. Her breathing would come back and forth, and it would be labored. So that's kind of what I call the death rattle. And it's also what the hospice nurses refer to it as well. Um, and as far as mending myself, gosh, some days I feel like I'm great. And then other days I feel like I'm punched in the gut. For me, she had went away to school, right? She was away to college, but she never came back. And so now to me, she's perpetually in school. And every once in a while, I'll be thinking, oh, I need to tell her, ah, right? And then that's when the breath comes out of my very being, and I have to suck it down. There's no magic answer. I think we all experience grief in our own way. For me, I threw myself into work, not necessarily a healthy thing to do. I tried to do grief counseling as well. Um, that didn't work for me because the counselor wanted me to do group therapy. And if you know me,
Oh my
I'm gonna
gosh.
take yeah, I'm gonna take on everybody else's emotions and help them heal. In the meantime, I'm gonna be an absolute wreck, right? Oops, I'm
Mm.
sorry. So I just kind of felt like, I had to find ways to do things that made sense for me. And a lot of that was just telling stories about Sonny. And that's really honestly what has helped me heal. And I have some great friends around me, and everywhere I look, I see beauty in every last thing. I appreciate even the stupid things. When I see a sunflower, I think of her and I know she's there with me, right? Cancer has a way, even if you're not the one that's had cancer, if it's been in your family and it's taken your loved one, or hasn't taken them for that matter, you're forced to look at things with so much more greater appreciation. Like I just lost my job a few weeks ago, and you know what? I don't even care. Like I care, but this is not the worst thing I've ever been through, right? And then being in relationships, I'm not worried about getting my heart broken because nothing is ever going to make me feel that depth of hurt again. So I think mending myself is just finding things to enjoy life and honoring her, sharing her story and honoring her memory. And by meeting all of you, you guys help me heal every time I listen to your stories too. And when you're telling me you're no evidence of disease or you're in remission, I feel like Sunny's right here next to me cheering y'all on. So that's how I cope.
Ligia,
Oh,
I know you have some questions. Ligia lost
yeah.
her mother to
I'm
cancer,
sorry.
so she's lost somebody very close to her. Do you have any questions for Kara?
Just I want to say something. I really admire you. I am also a mom, and I can imagine that. I can imagine that. I really admire you. And what you are doing right now, you are honoring her, right? Because see, maybe we never know because God works in ways that we don't understand. But we never know, but you are helping so many people around you by doing this, by being so brave and so strong and honoring your daughter, all the things that she went through. And that is one of the reasons why I'm also here because it's like you said before, every time I come here, I feel my mom is here with all of us. She never got this experience of having so much support. So for me, it's like she told me you should be there. You should be there with them. And that is why I feel all of you, even when I'm listening to your story, I feel so close to you and so close to your daughter. And I really admire you. I have no words because I can imagine going through that. And I know God has a purpose for all of this. I don't know what or why, but He always had a purpose. And maybe it is not easy. Even when you were talking, for me, it's really, really touching. But I know in the middle of all this, we should find the joy of life and the joy for helping others, right?
Yes.
So this is for you, Kat. I love you
Oh,
so
thank
much.
you. You're so
And you're
sweet.
and you're amazing. You're
Thank you.
amazing.
Let's open it up. Jamie or Carrie, do you have any questions or any comments for Kara? You're on mute, Jamie.
I was saying I can relate to a lot of that. In my past 2 years, I've lost my brother-in-law to pancreatic cancer and my own brother to colon cancer. So it's been one of those insidious things that has a tendency to, when it works its way in, it changes you. It absolutely changes you soup to nuts. And in my case, when I was diagnosed, changed me. Uh, but here's, and to Kara's point, which is just beyond valid, it woke me up in many ways I never even knew I had present. All of a sudden, everything changed for me. I went from a basic businessman, just trying to advance my career, make money, grow the businesses, that sort of thing. And none of that mattered after this. None. And as time went on, everything suddenly had a profound uh, clarity. And that, in and of itself, was a blessing that I never saw coming. And in retrospect, as awful as it is, as awful as it was, I would not change it for anything uh, because it literally gave me a purpose rather than a personal drive. And that purpose is so much more important. Uh, what Kara's doing, and all of you for that matter, it has a tendency, as awful as it is, it really makes you prioritize things in your life you never saw coming. And it's not surprising when all those priorities completely change. I know they did for me. And for those, when I spoke with my brother through his whole experience, and that took about 16 months or so. He went from a 200-pound man to 90 pounds. Uh, and I had to watch it. And we talked about it a lot. My brother was a little different than me in that he was very pragmatic, very living in the moment, is what it is. Don't worry about it. And that was just his way, right down to the day he died. But for the rest of us that have to watch it, it is a transition. It's not, it's horrible. It's horrible. We all know that. And yet, everything to Lahia's point, God has a mission, He's got a purpose. And we don't know what it is. We have to go through, I believe, a lot of really life's most difficult moments to form an appreciation for the best ones. And at least, as I say, I know that's what it did for me. And now, my wife of 46 years now, we couldn't get along better. And my kids, my grandkids, everything now has a different focus, a different light to it. It's changed my life in so many blessed ways. I couldn't list them all. And that's why I say, and I can say, if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't change it. I would take it on just the way I did, hope for the best, and understand maybe that was my need for a wake up call. I'm still here. Don't know how long that'll go, but let's hope for many more years. That's not my call. But what I can do is affect and change and hopefully give hope to others who went through and are going through and will go through what I went through. Uh, that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Jamie. Carrie, did you have something to say?
I'll keep it very brief. It wasn't a question. It was just to say thank you to Kara for sharing her daughter's story with us. And I echo what was already said about admiring the strength. And I think that she's doing a wonderful thing by advocating for others and doing work with I forget the name of the society, but I think that's just wonderful. And yeah, I can't imagine, like was already said, as a mom, having to deal with that. But just I echo that remark that was already said. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing about your daughter with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. And now, what I'd like to do, welcome Russ Hedge. Uh, I hope you're doing well, and I know you are. And I got that big smile of yours. I'd like to bring on Brittany Ross. And Brittany has her own separate story. She herself is a childhood cancer patient, having developed the same AML that Sonny had at the age of 15. So, Brittany, please share your story with us and tell us uh, about yourself as well.
Absolutely. First, Kara, I just want to say you and I are so much more connected than you could ever possibly begin to realize. I'd love to be able to connect with you one-on-one because
Absolutely.
we would have lots to talk about. Because I'm also born and raised in Maryland and Washington, D.C. From the time I was born until I was 18, I was diagnosed and treated in Washington, D.C., so I know it very well. And I'm also involved with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society and many other organizations. So like you and I are way more connected than you realize. But yeah, so my story is a little bit complicated and complex. There's a lot that goes into my story, but so in my family, it's yours, mine, and ours. My sister comes from my mom, my brother comes from my dad, and I come from both. They both were married to other people and had kids with other people before they came together and had me. And so a year and a half before I was born, my mom so she lost her own mother to a 13-year battle against metastatic breast cancer. When she was in college, her mom was given 6 months, and she lived with it for 13 years. And then a year and a half before I was born, my mom lost her 9-year-old son, Scott, to undiagnosed juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. He had a very rare complication, bled internally, went into a coma, and was gone within 2 weeks. And so when I got my diagnosis for my mom, I was strike three, you're out. I was going to be the straw that could potentially break the camel's back. And so it was a lot on both of my parents. And I mean, look, for me, luckily, everything the stars kind of aligned. I had a grandfather who was the #1 pediatrician in Baltimore when I was growing up, and was until they moved to Florida when I was 7. But he, at the age of 95, started taking care of the migrant workers' kids 3 days a week in Florida for free. He was an extraordinary human being. I come from an incredible line of family, and he was my pediatrician till the day he died at 98. And my sister and my brother-in-law got married in July of 2000. My brother-in-law happened to be doing his residency and fellowship in adult hematology oncology at Georgetown University Hospital. And then I got diagnosed in December 2000, just months after they had gotten married. And so I sort of had the doctors that I needed sort of right there, ready to go. And so I started to get sick beginning of my 8th grade year, or kind of, I guess, more end of my 8th grade year and beginning my freshman year of high school. But it was kind of the normal stuff that kids get when they're in school together. It was bad colds, bad flus, strep, pink eye, bronchitis, like all that kind of stuff that kids got just being in school together. So it was one after another, after another, after another, after another. And like, I don't think anybody even thought to kind of test my immune system. Like, I don't think anybody thought to like look to see if my immune system was shot at that point. I was dealing with some female issues and all kinds of different things. And so, and then eventually I got a really bad case of pneumonia. And then I ended up getting the shingles all down the left side of my face. And my brother-in-law basically went to my sister, who was almost 14 years older than me, and basically said, look, I don't want to be the bad guy here. Like, I'm not, I'm not trying to be, I don't want to be the villain, but like kids don't get the shingles. Like it just doesn't happen. It's not. And he was like, look, I'm 99.9% sure she's got leukemia. And so he kept a close watch on me. And then on the morning of December 12th of 2000, about 6 weeks into my sophomore year of high school, my dad was away on a business trip in Miami, Florida. My mom was home with me. And I woke up and I knew something was clearly very wrong. I like couldn't see straight. I couldn't hold my own weight. My head was pounding. I was coughing like crazy. I couldn't breathe. Like literally, like couldn't stand up. It was just everything. Like I was dizzy. I was nauseous. Like everything that you could have. And I just remember kind of getting down onto my hands and knees and like crawling into my mom's bedroom and trying to kind of pull myself up onto the corner of the bed. And I just sort of screamed out, just, I'm going to be sick. I'm going to be sick. And she kind of jumped out of bed and like pushed me into the bathroom. And I tried to kind of pull myself up onto the toilet seat. And I just kind of yelled out, I'm going to faint. I'm going to faint. I'm going to faint. And next thing I knew, I was waking up and her hands were underneath my neck. And there was like basically a group of EMTs and paramedics standing around me. And I could vaguely make out what they were saying. Like they kind of like, look, it's up to you, your choice. Like take her to the hospital. Don't like you have to let us know what you want to do. And I knew I had to go to the hospital, but I was not going to go in the ambulance. And so they picked me up, carried me down the stairs, put me in the back of my mom's car. And we went to a hospital that was closest to our house at the time called Shady Grove, which had had a lot of lawsuits that had been filed against it at the time, more than I care to ever think about. And my mom told the doctor there everything that I'd had, everything I'd been through, everything that, had been going on. And I remember very like vividly the nurse drawing my blood, and I watched her put the vials of the blood into the plastic bag, and I watched her walk it over to the nurse's desk, and she put it down on the nurse's desk, and the doctor told my mom I was just severely dehydrated, hooked me up to a saline drip, and I sat there for the next 3 hours and just watched the bag with my blood in it just sit on the nurse's desk, and they never sent it to the lab. And the doctor drew up the discharge papers and basically told my mom to take me home. And like you, Kara, my mom followed her mother's instincts, that super strong mother's gut intuition. And she basically looked at it and she was like, no, there's something wrong with my kid. Like she was like, there's something wrong with my child and I'm not taking her home until we know what's wrong with her. And he was like, oh, she just needs to rest and she just needs to ease it. And she was like, no, there's something wrong with my kid. Like, you need to send the blood to the lab. And so when the results came back, 67% of the cells in my bone marrow were leukemia cells. And they basically gave me 3 weeks and a 5 to 15% chance of survival. And my mom called my sister, who was a third grade teacher in an elementary school nearby. She got a sub, came and met us at the hospital. She called my brother-in-law at Georgetown. Obviously he wasn't going to say, I told you so, but, I think he wanted to. But he basically said, look, don't wait another second. He was like, I'm going over to talk to the pediatric oncologist in the pediatric cancer ward. Like, he was like, we'll get our room in the ward. We're going to set up a protocol for her. He was like, but don't wait another. He was like, get her into the car and get her down here, like, ASAP, and I'll meet you at the door. And they watched my mom and my sister come home. They basically like ripped the IV out of my arm and picked me up and ran me out to the car. It's about a 45-minute drive or so. And they admitted me that afternoon, and I started chemo the following morning. My dad was the one who ended up telling me that I had leukemia, which I knew what it was, because I'd seen the movie The Rainmaker with Matt Damon, and so I knew what leukemia was at the time, and I ended up doing 2 separate rounds of chemo. The first round was 35 days in the hospital with 24/7, incredibly aggressive, extremely intense chemotherapy with pretty much every side effect in the book. And spent Christmas and New Year's and my sweet 16 on January 13th of 2001 in the hospital undergoing treatment. And then, thank goodness, 4 days after my sweet 16 on January 17th, 2001, they officially declared me in remission and cancer-free and sent me home for 3 weeks to recover and recuperate before I went back in for the second round to make sure they'd gotten every little last tiny itsy bitsy ounce of it out of my system. And basically ended up going back in on my parents' 17th wedding anniversary on February 5th of 2001 and did another 45 days in with, again, super intense, super aggressive chemo. All of it was basically experimental at the time. And luckily stayed in remission, remained cancer-free. And then when I got out of the hospital on March 21st of 2001, they told us that my bone marrow would regrow itself within a 30-day period of time. And we waited and we waited and we waited and we waited, and nothing was happening and nothing was coming back and I was being poked and prodded and living off of nonstop blood transfusions and transfusions and IV antibiotics and anything they could give me to keep me alive as long as they possibly could. I was undergoing bone marrow aspirations and biopsies constantly, which, when you have somebody whose number one phobia is a needle, as you can imagine, I was not a entirely happy camper at the time. And so, like, they finally ended up coming to us and saying, look, we think her best chance of survival at this point is going to be a bone marrow transplant. They started looking for a match for me. They sent us all the way to the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center in Seattle, Washington, which was the number one transplant hospital at the time. And we met with the doctors there, and they said it would be another 4 to 6 months in the hospital, plus more chemo with less than a 50-50 shot. The best match at the time that they could find for me was a 4 out of 6 match, which at the time was considered incredibly dangerous and incredibly risky. And I just, at that point, I was like, I'm done. I'm not doing this I'm over it. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Leave me alone. I don't want to do this anymore. But as they say, the fight is 90% mental and 10% physical. And luckily, I think that scared me enough that finally, within about a week, like one cell at a time, I kind of willed myself to, I was like, come on, like, you gotta, and finally, one cell at a time, my bone marrow finally started to regrow itself. They watched me like a hawk, made sure that everything that was growing back was healthy, normal, that the cancer was not returning. And luckily, I have managed to remain in remission. I didn't do the bone marrow transplant. I didn't have any more chemo. And I still go in for full blood workups every 6 months to once a year, which, is never fun. And I have to get like EKGs and echocardiograms and every couple of years. And because one of the biggest risks is long-term heart issues. So they have to keep an eye on that to make sure I don't have any complications. So far, I mean, I think for me the worst long-term side effect I deal with now is anxiety, severe anxiety, PTSD. It's more definitely the mental, emotional, and psychological issues, the survivor's guilt from the friends that I've lost, and there's definitely moments for me where I'm like, this isn't fair and this sucks and why me and not them, and like it just, so I definitely have moments where I can go into that downward spiral of, being angry and wanting to kick and scream and throw a fit and wanting to feel like I want to throw something across the room, and so I definitely have my bad moments and
Excuse
my bad
me,
days.
Brittany, let me step in here. I mean, you've mentioned so many things, and
Yeah,
you brought up a good point about your mom. Like Kara did, your mom fought for you,
yeah,
uh, at the time when you didn't know what your diagnosis was.
yeah.
And advocating for yourself or having someone advocate for you is so critical.
Yeah.
I mean, we know our own bodies better than anybody else does. And if you in your heart know that
Yeah,
something is wrong, then you have to fight for yourself because the
yeah.
doctor doesn't know your body better than you do.
Oh,
You know your
absolutely.
body and you know if something is wrong. So my question for you is, when you got diagnosed,
Mhm.
you had a tremendous support system around you.
Incredible. Yeah.
Talk about that and how important it was because what thoughts were going through your mind when you got diagnosed and
Um,
then
I
you
mean,
had your support system.
I think at the time of my diagnosis, I mean, I was 15, so I was still, I went from being a kid to being an adult really, really quickly. I mean, I had to grow up in a moment, and I think honestly, I think I was so sick and so drugged at the time. I was pretty in and like I was pretty out of it most of the time. But I think yes, my parents slept on a single air mattress bed next to my hospital bed the entire time I was in the hospital. They never left my side until I got to a point where I was feeling good enough, where they would have friends or other family members come stay with me on the weekends, and then my parents would go home and take a shower and do laundry and get fresh clothes and all that kind of stuff, and then they would come back for the next week. And so, um, but yeah, I had an incredible support system. I had found out my sister was pregnant with her first child, like literally like a month before I got diagnosed. And I made a promise to my sister that that kid was going to have an aunt and that I was not going anywhere and that I was going to be here to help her raise that kid and help babysit and take care of them and be a part of their life. And my sister now has 3 kids, and my brother's got a kid as well. So I have 3 nieces and a nephew. I'm an aunt, I'm a proud aunt of 4, which is incredible. And they are growing up super quickly. But I think having that support system, knowing I had my brother-in-law there down the hall at all times, he sat in on every meeting. He was there for every to look at every bone marrow slide, to look at every blood draw, to look at like he was making sure that the best choices and the best decisions were being made on my behalf. And that took a lot of that extra stress and anxiety off of me and my parents to know that he was there and advocating for me. Um, but I think also part of it is now as an adult having to realize he also was put in an incredibly rough position because on one hand he was one of my doctors, but on the other hand, he also was family. He was my brother-in-law, he was my parents' son-in-law, he was my sister's husband, he was the dad to my first niece. And so having to then go home to my sister at the end of the day and trying to figure out how much to tell her, how much not to tell her, what's the boundary in terms of how much is too much information, like it, because she would always have lots of questions for him. And so I think, having to now getting to see things from their perspective and from their point of view as an adult. My brother-in-law has now written a book, and my story is chapter 6 in his book now, that is up on Amazon and has been published. And so, but yeah, I have an incredible support system. My mom's dad was the ninth of 10. So my mom's side, there's about 120 of us. I'm incredibly close with that entire side of the family. And so they all came in and out as that time was happening, and they all were a huge part of that support structure and continue to be today, as well as having amazing friends that have supported me through thick and thin.
That is beautiful. What I want to do right now is I want to stop the recording. So I want to just say to everybody out there, thank you so much for joining us at the Cancer Conquering Community. And we'll see you next week with our speaker, Rochelle Prosser, a mother, a nurse, and her husband dealt with cancer and her daughter dealt with cancer. So be sure to join us next week at the Cancer Conquering Community. Thank you so much.